Before we get started with this episode of the Artists and Emotions podcast, I want to give a little bit of a trigger warning that this episode contains subject matter such as strong language, depression, talks of serious depression, and what it's like to feel like nobody cares about you and you're all alone in the world. If this is stuff that triggers you and that you're not comfortable listening to, I highly recommend not listening to this episode of the podcast. But with any further ado, let's get this started. Welcome to the Artists and Emotions podcast. I'm your host, Cody Alexander Curtis, and today with me, I have one very handsome, very talented Scotty Venable. And for those of you who don't know, Scotty and I have not seen each other in quite a few years. So basically, how we first met is we were both going to the University of Southern Maine together, and we both got cast in like a little 10-minute short play showcase that was going on. And then after that, we didn't see each other for a couple more years, where we got cast onto a short film called Waitlist together. Scotty, how the hell are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm hanging in there. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. How are you doing?
I'm doing it.
Oh yeah, we're doing it. That's the motto of actors is we're doing it.
No,
we're doing it.
It is. No matter how exhausted or burned out we are, we're doing it.
Yep.
But
absolutely.
It has been, it's interesting for me because even though each time we've seen each other, it's been a few years apart. For me, talking to you now, it feels like I just saw you last week, even though
seriously,
it was like 2 years ago.
And I feel like that's the thing, the relationships that you build in theater, like going off on a little thing, is like you do have that, just that natural, like, because you are your most vulnerable when you're somebody else or you're acting with somebody. So of course it's going to be friendly and natural when you see them again after, so long.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny because one of my earlier guests and one of my friends, Lexi Gordon, we were actually talking about this, but in terms of the film space, because she's a director and a writer and a producer. And it's one of those things where, yeah, you can go so long without seeing somebody, and either a message will come up or a production will come up, or you'll just catch them out for lunch, and it feels like you never left each other.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
It's one of the amazing parts of this. And for speaking of productions, for everybody who is listening who might not know, Scotty I don't know if the production is still going on, but recently
one more weekend, Thursday through Sunday this weekend. Yep.
Okay, so currently Scotty is playing Prince Eric in a production of Disney's Little Mermaid, and I believe it's happening at Maine's Little Community Theater, right?
Yep, Community Little Theater in Auburn. Yep.
Yeah. So okay, first, I do want to talk about you and your history in acting and all of that, but I want to talk about the exciting stuff first here, which is from the time, like, first of all, what was the audition process like? And how was rehearsals leading up to the show, and how has the show been?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the audition process, I had known about, they had announced it. CLT is great with announcing their shows, when the season starts, and they had announced it. And I was excited. I was like, I want to audition. I've never even played a princely type role. And I saw that, and I went into the auditions, and I hadn't done a CLT show since I think they did Gypsy in 2016. And like, that was the last time. And I wanted to go in and sort of, prove myself and be like, hey, like I've been cast as LeFou for Beauty and the Beast. And it was like, oh, that goofy role. I want to try and prove myself and do it like, a more serious, princely, longing for romance role. And so I go in, and so many talented people, and like you were just talking about with like the naturalness of actors, it was like people that you don't even know that are in the audition room, you immediately are clicking with, you're talking to, and for me, that aspect of the auditions like eases my nerves to know that these are just all people who all just want to have a good time. The production staff, amazing. The director, Becca Tinkham, amazing. I'd never worked with her before, but she knows her stuff, and she was really passionate about The Little Mermaid, turning it onto a stage performance. And Brandon Shalhoub I knew, and so I go into this audition space, and I'm standing there and I'm presenting my song, and I'm looking over and I see Paul Karen on the piano, who's the music director, and worked with him before. And I'm like, it hit me. I was like, these people have not seen me in so long. I want to show them that, like, I am growing and I'm going to continue to grow as an actor. And I performed, I made some choices. I, put myself out there. I go to a callback and there's still just a amazing group of people that that come on audition, and I do my audition, and I end up leaving there, finding out after a bunch of emails that I get the role, and I dove right in. And rehearsal processes, man, when you have a musical production that has a butt ton of puppets and a set, you have to have, of course, Ariel's iconic lifting up off the rock. You have to have that rock. You have to have a ship, an entire ship. I was really impressed by not only with what we're given, and I'm assuming how community theater budgets are. You don't
Yeah.
get the greatest, and so to be able to work with what we had was phenomenal. And I recommend everybody go see it. There's puppets. Sebastian is a puppet, but it's creative in a sense of, like, the actors are the people and they're acting, and they have these puppets on. It's like they're one, Sebastian talking, Flounder, and it was just such a beautiful experience to see me not only go in, not not having, acted as a prince before, but to go in and see all of these, wonderful people who have to be versatile and quick, and the dancers and everything like that, just all coming together. And I'd be lying if I said there wasn't stressful parts in the production where you're like, oh, I don't know where it's going to go. But once you hear that applause on the first night, and I was telling this to Chris Schiavelli, who is my Grimsby, I told him, who has never acted before or been in a production, I say, it's stressful and crazy, but once you hear the applause at the end of that first song, you're like, this is it. This is, and once you feel that at curtain call, the applause, it's like, that's when it's like, it's all worth it. And this is why I do this. This is why I do this work.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. First of all, I gotta ask, did they and this is a little bit of insight for anybody who's listening who's either not an actor or not in the arts and wants to sort of know in terms of auditioning what it's like for musicals. It can go one of a couple of ways. One, they can have you either audition with a piece from the show itself, and I find most of the times that happens in callbacks. But initially, it's either that, or more commonly, you got to bring in and sing a piece that's 16 to 32 bars, which is roughly 30 seconds to a minute. What did they have you do? And if you did, what song did you pick?
Yeah,
For your
so
audition?
I didn't know until a few weeks prior to auditions, but they wanted, the initial audition to be something from the show.
Okay.
Which I had prepared just in case. I had prepared because they do very much like to see something in the style of the production. I wouldn't go in and be singing Joanna from Sweeney Todd.
Yeah, no.
Right. It's like,
No.
I want to go in and have something sort of in the same realm. And so I picked Proud of Your Boy from Aladdin. And I went in prepared with that. And then I had heard a few weeks prior, it's like, oh, they want something from the show. And I'm looking around, and I hear Her Voice, which is his ballad, his, trying to find her voice. And I listened to that and I was like, this is majestic. This is amazing. I feel this song, and I prepared it. And I go in and I audition with Her Voice, and then callbacks come and they say, we want you to do or actually, no, I didn't start with Her Voice. I actually started with One Step Closer, which is the dancing song. I had prepared Her Voice, mind you, and Proud of Your Boy. Then I find out they wanted One Step Closer. I go in, I audition with One Step Closer. Callbacks, I say, okay, instead of singing One Step Closer again, I'm going to sing Her Voice, which is that, big ballad. I performed that. And it was great because that really helped me when I got casted in the role, because I had prepped both songs, so I knew both songs going into the production already, which was great. Instead of saying like, and I love preparing songs that are outside of the show, but I think it really helped me get into character and also prepare that if I were to get the role, I already know it. I can work more on it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just like giddy here because first of all, I haven't done a theater production in a little bit, and I'm really looking forward to the chance where I can get on stage again.
Yeah.
But I find it so interesting, and this being on the outside and supporting my friends who are in shows, it's interesting. Your opening weekend, you had The Little Mermaid, and my buddy Cody O'Toole, he's in a production of Rent right now.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
Yeah.
his show just wrapped. But the thing that struck me is that you said that you had prepared Proud of Your Boy
Mhm.
from Aladdin for your audition. That's what he did for his
Oh,
audition
that's
for Rent.
crazy.
And
Yep.
he
Yeah.
got cast as Collins
Oh,
in their
wow.
production. And the only thing that I'm so upset about is that I couldn't be there for the show,
Right.
because
Yeah.
Rent is one of those shows that's still on the list of like
Yeah.
top 3 musicals that I love that I still have not seen a production of.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I haven't seen it live. I saw the movie, and people are either hit or miss. They're like, "Oh my gosh, the movie," or they're like, "Oh yeah, the movie." I watched the movie, and like every time I watch it, I bawl my eyes out. I am like, I love the theme, the style of it, and yeah, I mean, I saw Rent live, which was, Jordan Fisher as Mark, things like that, and it was amazing. But it's just, that's one of those productions that I do really want to see live in person.
Now, I gotta on a more I want to get some laughs out of our listeners, because I know that, I mean, you know this. Every time you go into production, there is something that will happen either during the show or during rehearsal that
Oh
makes
yeah.
everybody to the point of gut
Yep.
busting laughing. And I'm
Yep.
gonna I'm gonna share the one that happened when we were for everybody listening, the short play showcase that we did in college was for our buddy at the time, Jared Vigu. And we did a scene where Scotty came in and was somebody trying to get seats on a plane, but everything in terms of his identification was not working out. Me,
Yep.
I played somebody who stole Scotty's identity during the
Yep.
course of that like 10-minute showcase. What happened though is Aaron Kirches, who was also in the show with us, he was playing the person behind the desk getting all of the information. There was a pencil on that table. And at a certain point, I took Scotty's wallet, walked in, and slammed it down on the table. We had a full audience, mind you, in a black box theater. So the audience was probably 4 feet away from where we were performing. The pencil probably went up 3 feet in the air, came down, and landed exactly where it had. And we were supposed to just sit there like nothing happened. And it was the hardest thing not to laugh while that was going on. You weren't on
Always one of those things. Always one of those things.
Yeah, you weren't on stage at the point, and I'm
No.
pretty sure I heard you and Jared laughing, like, behind the
Yeah.
scenes. But
It always there's something. There's something.
what was one or a couple of things that happened during the course of The Little
Oh,
Mermaid that happened? Or at least,
yeah.
like, one of your favorite time that kind of thing happened.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's always something. And what I always this is like a theater superstition of mine, is you always go in, you're nervous for that first production, and you put on that first production, and it like afterwards you're like, wow, that was amazing. And I think this is, mixture of psychology, but also a superstition of like the second performance, something always goes wrong. Either the whole production is hit or miss here and there, or technical errors, things like that, but just something. It's always the second show. And maybe it's because, we get more comfortable with the first one and we're like, okay. But what had happened was, I don't know if this was the second performance or the third. There were two different instances. The first that we still laugh about, gut busting laughing. Uh, the scene where Ariel's in, I bring her to the palace and we preem her, get her a dress, things like that. She has this bathtub that is in center stage and she's there, and she's singing in her internal dialogue. So she's singing out loud, but it's in her, in her head. And she's getting, puts on a towel, runs behind, quick changes into a dress, comes out. And this bathtub, from the audience's perspective, looks like a bathtub. But what it is, it's more of wood with, duct tape and foam. And it's just a half, like you get a bathtub and you cut it in half. It's that. And she walks past this bathtub to sing, and all you see is just slowly this bathtub just fall over, and you see on the inside, you see all the wood, all the duct tape, things like that. And it really much, in that moment, I was like, this is like the show that goes wrong when the walls fall down.
Yep.
And she looked over, like the audience starts laughing, and Mackenzie looks over and she's like, oh no, she's like, I'm just gonna keep acting. I have to come out for a second with my coat on, and I have to get ready to go meet her. And I'm like primping, and I see this, and I'm keeping a straight face. And I go, okay, what am I going to do? What would Eric do? And so I have to walk past this bathtub. And so I walk past and I pick it up just sort of casually, and I go, and I dust it off like princely. And I walk, and I take not even 2 or 3 steps, and it falls over again. And I just kept walking, and the audience explodes because it was like perfect comedic timing of me being like, lift it up, brush it off, walk, boom. And it was hilarious. And Mackenzie's trying to sing her song, and she's like borderline breaking. That, I think, would be one of the most hilarious. We still, the stage manager ended up coming up on the stage and like looked at the audience, was like, picks up the bathtub, walks off the stage. The audience applauded, this huge applause during the song. It was amazing. And it really shows you, it's like, during rehearsals, maybe we'd be stressed out about it, but it's theater. Theater's not always going to go perfect, and you just have to play it off, and the audience loves it. If you play it off, if you have fun with it, the audience loves that. If you make it awkward, if you're like, oh no, oh man, or you're stressing out, they can sense that, and so it was really great that Mackenzie was just having just a holding character. I come on, try to fix it, and it just was just the silly little thing that happened. And it's always those little things. But the one thing that I laugh about it now, but at the moment was terrifying, is the song before her voice is She's in Love. And our music director has to, turn his keyboard down, transpose it about 2 half steps before. And he does this, and he's supposed to turn it back to my song after that song concludes. It's a segue right into the song. I rush on. It's this emotional ballad, and I hear him play the notes. And instantly I'm like, oh no, he didn't turn the key back. And I'm like, okay, I can't find this note. And I have to sing like, where did she go? Like I have to sing this. And I'm like, I can't find it. So I start acting it like a monologue. I go, where did she go? Where can she be? And he's playing it. And then you hear the band trying to come in. And obviously the band can't tune theirs down. And so Paul's playing this piano piece, this beautiful piano piece, but 2 keys down, and the other instruments are coming in, and it's just sounding horrendous. It's like, it's so funny because he's playing this beautiful thing, but it's like when you put 2 half notes next to each other, and it's like, or half steps next to each other. And I just start acting. I'm like, somewhere there's a girl who's like the glimmer of the, and I start like acting it. And I'm like, because if I stop, if I freeze, if I panic, the audience is going to see that. And I'm like, I can't, I have to, you push through. By the second verse, he adjusted it, and I finished it nice and strong, beautifully, got the, the applause, and people didn't even know. Some people didn't even know. And it's just one of those moments you go on stage and you freeze. You're like, oh no. Or like if you forget a prop, if you forget, like, it's one of those, like, we have to make it work. And so those 2 experiences, I would say, were I look back on the most memorable moments.
I love it.
For sure. And there's going to be more probably this weekend.
I mean, yeah, more than likely. More than likely. And I think it's my favorite part of those kinds of mix-ups is not necessarily when you are the person who messes up, but if you're acting with a person in the scene who does, and
Yes.
you get to save them.
Yes.
it's
Yep.
it's one of my favorite things. But we've been talking about The Little Mermaid
Mm.
for a little bit, and I want to turn it to you because we've had a few conversations about this, and
Mm.
I forgot to mention the fact that Scotty and I were in a production of Mice and Men together.
Which is a very deep show.
Yeah,
Very deep. Yeah.
and that was the show where I just, yeah, obviously we had that 10-minute, that like little 10-minute
Yeah.
thing, but it's the show where I just looked right at you. And for everybody listening, forgive my French here, but I just looked at Scotty. I was like, holy shit, this guy really cares about this stuff.
Oh,
And then
absolutely.
Scotty and I, we got to talking about that. For that production, as deep and dark as it was one of my favorite experiences in
Oh, it was
college.
such a blast. Such a
It
blast.
was because of you and everybody. It was
Yeah.
literally, it was one of those productions where it's going to be fond memory for a long, long time. But with that in mind, Scotty, I want to talk about how you got into acting and like what your journey has been like for this. Because I know a lot of the discussions that we've had, there's something that you've talked about to me that I don't think a lot of people know about
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, acting I feel like really holds a big piece for me. And of course like, you know, it's we have to make it a hobby because getting into it as a career is just so hard sometimes and it's like, pushing it in. But for me it's something more than that. And I had started my acting career of course doing, like playing Santa Claus and in kindergarten for like like a little classroom production thing, of course. But my big one that sort of brought me into this was Oliver at Lewiston High School in I think it was 2010. I was 9 or 10 at the time, and they wanted to cast Oliver as a kid and have the high schoolers be everybody else. They wanted like kids as the actual workhouse kids, and I remember like I had not I had never even touched singing, mind you. I had bits of like doing acting things, around the house or like impersonating characters and stuff, of course, but never had acted fully in a production. And I go in, I meet Richard Martin, who is an amazing director, amazing person. And he trusts me, he hears me, he sees me, excuse me, he trusts me and he casts me as this lead. And I remember how, scared and nervous I was going in. I've never done this before. And I step in and it's one of those things of like, this is a community. And like all these high schoolers, there were some high schoolers there, obviously, who were like, oh, the lead is played by a kid, like bummer, But a lot of them were very welcoming and open and it there were, a few people that really stick to mind that like really helped me. It was like Scotty Gagne, Leslie Gale Reed, Sarah Shalou. Like these people at the time were like my people that had told me like this can be a home away from home. These are people that are going to be there for you and who are going to hold you. And for me, like I have a lot of, I think I've told you about this. Like I was adopted when I was younger, pretty late in terms of psychological development. I was 4 years old and I had missed out a lot on that maternal bonding that you get as a child. And I won't go into the scientific psychological stuff, but that's very much needed for a baby, needed for a toddler. It's how you learn how to manage emotions, how things like that. And I didn't have that. I'd bounced from a few foster homes and had gone into my current home. And so attachment was a very big theme, and it still is a very big theme of my life. And when you go into a production where there are people that just instantly see you and are warm and welcoming to you, you look up to them and you're like, it wasn't even for me. Of course, the production was great, but it was just knowing that these are people that when you go into production with, these are people that are going to be there for you and who are going to help you. And it really is a family away from, family. And to also, I guess, recognize that when I had, you know, put myself into a different character, in a very sad way, it was relieving to step away from my life. And that continues to be a really big reason why I love acting is I get to put my life on pause for a minute. I don't get to think about money or bills or, attachment or anything like that. I get to be this character who does have a stable home, or I get to be this character who, does have these issues, but sort of like a fairy tale in the end, sometimes it's all happy. And of course there are the tragedies, but for me, like that is a place where I feel comfortable because it's a place where I can be that away and then also have a community with me. So that stuck and continues to be a really big reason why I do this work.
I love that. And I'm just gonna put this out there because this is something that thoroughly impressed me, and it garnered a lot of respect for you from me. Is if I remember correctly, there was one point where you were telling me you had the opportunity to audition for Julliard.
Yes, yes. So yeah, that was a really big moment in my life because it was something that I saw as a statistic. I looked at Juilliard, 7%. Even my, choir teacher was like, I mean, and my mom at the time, like she was very supportive of it, but to find out that the application is a $60 application when there's a very slim chance of getting in. And I remembered like I looked at that and I was like, but there's a chance. There's a chance. And I go and I prep all my materials. I, do my singing, I do my acting, and I'm expecting, I show up at the Juilliard School, beautiful place, really gorgeous place. And I see thousands of people. And this, mind you, was one day out of, I think, a few, and thousands of people. And I'm sitting there and I'm bashing myself. I'm like, I'm not going to get in. And I'm like trying to convince myself to just like get over it, whatever. But then I just realized I'm like, but these are people that are sitting at this chair that are seeing me. One of them on the board was a Broadway producer. One of them, I think, had done a few shows off Broadway. One of them was one of the heads of the school and stuff. And so these are people who are seeing you and seeing your ability. And I go in, and it's so funny. I wish I could make this up, but I didn't. I go in and I perform my monologue, and I remembered that I had 2 dramatic monologues and 2 comedic monologues prepared, and I assumed that they were gonna do maybe just 2 monologues. Oh, a comedic and a dramatic, and they did a comedic and a dramatic. They wanted another dramatic. I performed my other dramatic. After that, they say, "Can you show us another dramatic?" And at this point, I had already done in front of them. The average audition is supposed to be about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm about the 7-minute, 8-minute mark. I had done my first dramatic monologue, my comedic, and then I had done another dramatic. So I'm out of dramatic monologues prepared. And they say, "Can you present us with another dramatic monologue?" I wish I could make this up too. I was not going to say, I'm in my gut, I'm like, I'm not going to say in front of them, I don't have that prepared. I can't do that. And so I start, I wish I was joking. I start improvising a dramatic monologue. And I had remembered, like, I just was like, please, universe, just give me the strength to just find something deep within me that one looks believable, and two, shows my ability. And I remember I just start improvising this monologue about a bird coming to a crossroads and needing to choose one or the other, and looking to the left and finding, uncertainty and scare and being scared, and the other seeing stability and comfort. And then I remember I'm sitting there just improvising this monologue, and it's like something within me was speaking for me, I swear. And I remember like saying like, the bird chooses the uncertainty because at the end of the line there was something greater for that bird when faced with uncertainty. And like I remember like the board was like, okay, thank you. Like they have to be like, okay, thank you. I walk out of there, I'm like, I'm like, that is the most unprofessional thing I could have done, is just make up my and I'm like, no, it was horrible. It was probably really bad. I come to find out when I go to callbacks, they knew I improvised that. They had called me back, not only because they thought I was a great actor, but they knew they had purposely, they knew because they had told us when we had auditioned, they said, bring 2 comedic, 2 dramatic. They knew that they were expecting people to not have 3 dramatics prepared or whatever. And they just wanted to see just what will he do? And they were like, you did what an actor who has that deep within them would do, is like, you make it work, and they brought me to callbacks, and I do this callback audition. And I think it's in front of a smaller group of people. And I do it, and I leave, and I'm like, okay, that's it, whatever. Mind you, this is now in front of just a few hundred people out of the thousands that came. I go back to the hotel. I'm like, okay, whatever, let's pack up. I was like, okay, let's pack up. I get a call, I think. My first one was an email. I get a call saying if I could come back for a 3rd round of auditions. And I didn't even know there was a 3rd round. I was like, I don't know how this works. I said, yes, of course. I go back. It's me and 30 people. And mind you, this is 30 people in the entire country that had these were people from other days who had stuck through for the weekend and stayed. Me out of 30 or 40 people. And I'm like, this is surreal. They give me a folder, and I have a picture of it, a folder with the Julliard school on it. They give me a bunch of prepared materials and stuff, and they walk you through a day of going in the school. And what it came down to, of course, they only choose 16 kids in the whole country for that specific program. And I won't forget what they had told me was, keep doing what you're doing. Keep building this up. He go, the guy who'd called me, and he said, we want you to just have more experience to get that, because I was right out of high school. All I had were maybe a few community theater shows, some of them not even leading roles, and they said what it came down to is like, you have the talent, you have the ability, and it's like, build up your resume, just get that skill, and please come audition again. And I was like, wow. I still haven't, of course, but
Yeah.
it's something like, of course, finances suck, of like, okay, that's a really expensive school, but to know, just the money thing aside, that like I was one of these groups of kids who, like, one person came from Canada, another person flew from across the country from England, and like I was one of them in this area. And I'm like, I remember people being like, oh, I'm so sorry, that's a bummer. My mom being like, oh, it's okay, sorry about that. And I'm like, I refuse to apologize. I refuse to like look at this as a bummer. I was like, this is one of the most successful things I feel like I've done. It doesn't, and then that for me also unlocked the thing of like, why, as we as society, say that you have to achieve something for it to be worthwhile? Like, why do we have to say you have to get that role, or you have to get into this thing, or you have to get this, to feel accomplished? And it's like that's what society, I feel like, ingrains in us. And for me, I was like, that was the first time where I was like, no, I'm not gonna bum myself out and be like, oh, it wasn't worth it, I just went all the way there for nothing. It's like, no, I'm proud of myself, and I did this. So, and I still hold that as one of my greatest, proudest moments.
And you absolutely should. And I think you hit on something that is a perfect transitioning point
Mm,
for us to talk about mental health and for us
mm,
to sort of be talking about that, because that whole idea of being ingrained that you need to achieve something, that you need
mhm.
to you've got to have something to showcase to the rest
Yeah.
of the world that you're worthy of whatever external praise
Yep.
is coming, when you really should be worried about your own, how you feel about yourself first.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
find it interesting you bring that up, because I personally had an experience like that while we were at USM together.
Mhm.
So first of all, for those of you who don't know, and I slowly came to realize this, is that you and I have a love for a very particular show that was written by Jason Robert Brown, and
Mm.
that show is The Last 5 Years.
Yeah.
And for me, it's always a show that I'd kind of admired, but I didn't know that I had the capability of actually playing Jamie in the show vocally. But my last semester I was at USM, I was like, okay, everybody is talking about this one vocal instructor named Ed Reichart, which, Ed, if
Love
you're
Ed.
listening, Ed
Love
is
Ed.
wonderful. Um, I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick a song, see if I can do it for him, and we'll go from there. For whatever reason, my brother and I, when we were younger, we sort of had this competition to see who could sing the entirety of "Goodbye" from Catch Me If You Can.
Oh,
But
love
the
that song.
the thing is, when we were younger, we never could do it. And I had a little bit of backstory. From 2014 to 2016, I did an intense theater program out west in Idaho. And part of that was vocal training. But I hadn't really done any vocal anything since then.
Mhm.
So I was like, for whatever reason, my gut is telling me I need to present this song to Ed. And so I did. And as soon as Ed heard that, it was almost like culture shock. Like, the look that he gave was almost like, I can't believe that this kid who has done nothing really at all at this school was able to
Yeah.
do this. And for me, it was a shock, because it was the first time. And for those of you who don't know, the entire course of the song is very, for at least for the first quarter of it, is it's basically in the baritone range.
Yeah.
And then the end of it
Whew.
is just like
Whew.
nonstop
Yeah.
tenor and high B flats. Uh
Your diaphragm hurts after
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine how sore Aaron Tveit was after
Oh
every
my
single show.
gosh.
But essentially, I did this for him, and after I was done, I just sat back. I was like, I can't believe that just happened. And immediately after it was done, Ed's like, well, I want you to know that I'm also the music director for a production of The Last 5 Years. I would love for you to come see the show. And since you are a student, I can have you come see the show for free. And so I did.
Wow.
First of all, for anybody who has not seen The Last 5 Years staged, it is one of the, like, the show itself is beautiful story wise, anyways, but the way that it was staged was amazing, because it was basically Jamie and Kathy were on the stage spun, and in the middle of this spinning stage was a giant circular archway. So it's like, whenever you
Wow.
had either Kathy or Jamie in the front singing their piece, you could see the other actor in the background staying in character and getting prepared for what they had to do next. And then when it
Yeah,
came
because they
to
flip flop. It's like, isn't it like, yeah, because Jamie's story from his
is
perspective
is
starts from the
forward,
beginning to the end. Yeah, and Kathy's is
reversed.
I love that mechanic. Just throwing that
Yeah.
out there. That is such a creative.
But then uh, they it just solidified how much I love the show, because in the next 10 minutes they would start just looking at each other through this archway in their wedding outfits, and then as it went along, as the stage spun, they got closer and closer until at the very end of the song they were together arm in arm in front of the
Wow.
audience. I went to see that show, and I'd had an admiration, of course, because of the production with Jeremy Jordan and Anna Kendrick that came
Yes.
out. I was like, I love this musical. I love what the show does. I want to see where we can go from here. Didn't get the opportunity to like fully do it. But the thing that surprised me the most was realizing that Ed got me to the point to where I could play Jamie in the show, because my senior song for well, there was a couple different ones we had to do. It was like a fall and a spring showcase. One of the songs that he allowed me to do for our Zoom final was Take a Chance on Me
Oh, yeah.
from Little Women. And then the other one, what if COVID had not happened, he was gonna gear me up to perform Nobody Needs to Know as my senior
Oh,
final.
oh,
And that song like got me to such, because the beautiful thing, I from an acting perspective, I love about the last 5 years is it is less so about being the most perfect like vocalist on the planet, which is what a lot of musicals do.
yep,
And for
yep,
me, I think that is a bit of a flaw, but I do get it. But the last 5 years is a show that requires you to be solid in your singing and solid in your acting,
oh,
but
absolutely.
more so on the acting portion. And for me, like you were saying with Juilliard, I came out of my senior year of college and I was like, that solidified for me that if even if it doesn't happen for me now while I'm young, I have the ability to play this character down the road.
Yeah,
And for
yeah,
me, it's a super fulfilling thing. But with that being said, let's dive right in terms
yeah,
of, because I think there's a few directions that we can take this. I mean,
yeah,
in terms of just school, in terms
yeah,
of young people and mental health, in terms of people inside of this darn industry and mental
yeah.
health. So I'll let you sort of take the charge on here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you know, like I didn't complete my course through with USM, and it really bummed me out because it was for me a very this was before I had even known that mental health and depression and anxiety were things that were valid to present to, you know, to board members and to things, and say like I need help. And that's the thing that really sucked for me is I slowly just degraded. Like I slowly, fell down, and I was in a relationship at the time that had gone from high school into college, and I wasn't, the greatest partner, and we just didn't weren't able to make it work, but we were trying to just hold on to that. We were trying to hold on to that thing. And I had missed out on a lot of opportunities because I was trying to focus on that, because that is what I believed my future was. And I just remember like slowly just I wouldn't go to classes. I was not on my ADHD medication, which very much I needed and helped me a lot when doing coursework. And I remember just switching majors because I was like, musical theater. Everybody's saying that this isn't a profitable industry. Why would you get a degree in this when you can, And I look back at my like time at the musical theater department being like, it wasn't even about necessarily me learning new things. It was like I was able to experience and be seen and heard and meet new people and get connections. And I just remember it slowly got to the point like my anxiety was so bad at the time. I was only diagnosed with my, reactive attachment disorder, which was that sort of childhood attachment thing. Um, and I didn't know how to get my own therapist. I didn't know, because in high school, my mom would help me a lot with that, would do all the doctor's appointments, things like this. And then you dive into living on campus and it's like you're on your own. And when it is a point of like the realization for me of like these professors, of course they care about me, but they don't care if you don't come to school. They're not going to call you and say, "Hey, where are you?" They're not going to email you and say, "Hey, we need you here," blah, blah, blah. They're just going to put in your grade. And my grades declined, and I changed majors to music education, which is one of the hardest majors. And I'd found that out early. And then I switched to music. And all throughout this, I was like, where do I belong? What do I do? You know, well, I need to find something that makes money, but I also need to do something I love. And I just remember like I was distancing myself from people, from friends. Um, I had ended up, being on and off with my relationship. And like it it really taught me that like I didn't know that this was a valid obstacle that I can ask for help with. And now I'm continuing to go through therapy and stuff like that. Like I am diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and major depressive disorder and things like that they changed my diagnosis of my attachment to a complex form of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is it's unfathomable. And it's like these are things that if I had just told myself like my mental health is valid, just like I would tell you, just like I would tell anybody else of like you need help and like I'll help you as much as I can. I think I just needed to be that for myself and I never was. And one of the common themes I tell people all the time is I always put others ahead of myself, and it's not in a way of like, oh, just so you can do it, you can give it back to me. It's to the point of like I don't realize that like I'm worthy of things. And my mental health just again, like I said, dropped and I did not ask for help and get help. And so I slowly just didn't go to classes and I just poofed. I failed a bunch of classes and I went to my advisor and was like, "Hey, I think I am having a." I remember I like lied and said like I think I'm, feeling sick physically because I thought that that is the excuse I needed to make for it to be valid. Like I couldn't say mentally I am the most depressed and anxious I've ever been in my life. That's not valid. So I needed to like lie and come up with like a health thing of like I'm always dizzy and I'm always, whatever. And I ended up going on administrative just hold, like a hold on there. And then just slowly geared away and just stopped going. And I regret it. Um, I miss it a lot. And it sucks that like of course now I have the skills to advocate for myself and say like I am protected not only by my own advocacy and others advocacy, but I'm protected by law. We have accommodations that are allowed to be made and stuff, and I just wish I'd put that forward because I walked out of there being like I'm a failure. And I remember how sad it was. One of the most sad things to see the people that I was in school with posting graduation photos. That for me was like, you know, really like a turning point of like, are you a failure? And it's like, no, I'm not. I just needed help and I didn't get that. I didn't ask for it. And yeah, I feel like that's where it started. And I'm uncovering more about myself because of it. And I'm thankful it happened. But it did suck that, I had to leave.
Yeah, and it's totally understandable. And I think, at least for me, the key takeaway here is eh, your like your friends and family and the people around you, they can do what they can to try to help you if they sort of understand.
Yeah.
But reaching out and saying I need help, number one, anybody who is out there that thinks it's stupid or cowardly or something,
No,
which
do it.
which it sounds like you and I are on the same page, where at a certain point, I don't know about you, I was too proud to
Mm.
say I need help. And
Right.
there
Yeah.
it's like, if you get in, first of all, if anybody listening, if somebody tells you that therapy doesn't work or it didn't
Oh,
work for
yeah.
them or something else, it just, number one, if somebody says therapy didn't work for them, it just means they didn't find the right therapist. Number two, if
Yes.
somebody tells you that therapy doesn't work, turn the other direction and run. Because I don't think
Yeah.
my buddy Ethan Rogers, who was on an earlier episode of this podcast, he said there is not a single person who goes through 18 years of life where they shouldn't have a professional to talk to, at least
Absolutely.
something. And even now,
Yep.
being like a full-fledged adult, it's not like when you're younger, which you may or may not have had like very traumatic experiences that
Mhm.
have formed you. But as an adult, just having somebody to talk to on the outside to make you kind of rethink certain things that might be happening in your week, it helps a lot. I mean,
And it's important because, like, I was the person, like, I just needed the empathy, like, I needed a friend to talk to, and of course, that is completely valid, like, a lot of people need a friend to hold on to,
yeah,
but when it gets so deep, it's like, you can have both, you can have friends to lean on, but you also need that professional advice, like, you need that person who is trained in this stuff, who has skills to give you, because you can't just and that's what I thought I could do, is just go through just leaning on friends or my partner or my family to get that, but you don't learn those skills or you don't
no.
get blunt, real advice that is meaningful.
Yeah, and I think touching on that, it's important for anybody who's listening here. I will always say again, yes, while I do, me and Scotty do completely advocate for anyone and everyone to go see therapy. Going to see a therapist with everything else is a personal decision, and you should
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
go see a therapist until number one, you can admit to yourself you need help,
Yeah.
or you want to go see someone.
Yes. So
And
that's
you
that's what they say about it all the time is like, especially for people who are struggling with like substance abuse and stuff, the first step to solving any problem is realizing, hey, there is a problem here. And if you're just going, that's me growing up. Like I went through, I think when I started when I was 7 or 8, went through family therapy. My mom would stop in. Sometimes I'd have individual sessions, but I didn't know what it was for. I thought we just got to sit and talk about my day, because I was told I had to go. And it's like that changes the aspect so much of like when you go and it's like, I have to go and sit for an hour and talk about my feelings versus this is going to help me. Let me find things that I'm curious about that I need to talk about or uncover about myself.
and you
I
need to
agree.
I mean, to go on with that, you need to find a therapist who knows how to work with you and what therapy methods work with you. For instance, this is just and ultimately I have found through some introspection and working with my therapist that ultimately the kind of therapy methodology that works for you is going to come down to your personality type.
Yeah.
Me, I'm the kind of person who I need to basically word vomit everything
Yeah.
out. But I know people in my own life who their best way of working because they're more introverted is they
Mhm.
like they like somebody to ask them questions that they can
Yeah.
think about and then come up with sort of
Yeah.
a solution. And
Mine
in
is like
my
the hypotheticals. We do a lot of analogies in my personal therapy of saying like, I brought up a Dear Evan Hansen lyric last time of like, I've learned to slam on the brakes before I even turn the key. Like, I come up with those analogies and those help me. And there's always that one or two tools that you find help connect you and like understand your mental health more. And for some people, it's like you said, word vomiting everything. Sometimes it's asking questions. Sometimes it's just starting the session off with, a little analogy about your life. Like it works for everybody.
Yeah, and the best this is once again, this is just personal belief here, but in
Mhm.
my opinion, the best therapist is not going to tell you what you should be doing. The
Yeah.
best therapist is going to give you the tools for you to start thinking
Yeah.
about what's going on in your life, but ultimately they're there to talk
Yeah.
with you about what's going on with your life, but to allow you to find your own solutions.
Yeah.
And if you need extra guidance, that's what they're there for too.
Yeah, and like that's how I learned really when I got into my new therapist. I've been with him for about a year now. That's how I learned that this is my childhood and also growing up, not only my infancy and my early childhood, but my school age into adult and just the way that my mom parented me. She was a very authoritarian sort of parent, and unfortunately that's just how she knew and she had a lot of stress. She was a single mom, she was older. And so like there was a lot of that. And so when you're looking at somebody and you're like, I need you to be okay all the time. Like I uncovered that I'm what's called a fawner. Like I need to people please because it's like if I see that you're upset, then that means you could be upset at me and leave. That's where the core thing happens. And so I remember growing up, like just recently uncovered, like I was doing a lot of that. I learned that you can't set boundaries because if you set boundaries, these people can say no and just leave, say that's not a boundary I like. And so I would allow myself to be uncomfortable, to be hurt, to be, you know, yelled at, things like that instead of setting a boundary. And the thing they don't teach you too is like you can set a boundary at any age. At any age, if you are uncomfortable with something, if you are, and I wish I knew that, and I still am trying to discover how to set a boundary and say no. That is the biggest thing I have a hard time with is saying, no, I can't. I have to write 2 paragraphs of a reason why I can't, do something or I don't want to, versus just saying, no, I have this going on today. And, and saying no in a family structure that is very much like, and I don't blame her for it. It's just the way that she parents is like, you have a parent who says like, I am the adult, you are the kid, you learn very quickly that you can't say no. Even if you're uncomfortable, you can't say no. And so like, I remember that like I would get, my mom would get very frustrated a lot of the time and it would come out in, either yelling or sighing or frustration. And I would just see that and you're modeled that and you're like, is this how you react to things? Is this how? And then I would do it and it would be like, no, like, don't do that. I'd be like, I'm stressed. I'd be like, oh, well, you don't deserve to do that. I can do that because I'm the adult, And it very much started a path of like, how do I express when I am sad or frustrated without giving people the opportunity to maybe leave me, to maybe abandon me if I do that. And again, I don't blame her for it. It's just very unfortunate that the emotional intelligence isn't there. And I say that a lot as somebody who studies psychology of like, when you say somebody is emotionally unintelligent, it sounds very offensive. It sounds like you're saying like, oh, you're dumb. It's totally not. It is an innate thing that you can't help. If you're not emotionally intelligent, you can't help that. And so like when I say like, my, some of my people in my family or my mom, like were either emotionally unavailable or emotionally unintelligent. It's not a bad thing. It's just, that's how, unfortunately, how I grew up. And I had learned like when people are uncomfortable and upset, it's my job to make them feel better, because if they are okay, why would they leave you if they're feeling happy and okay? So it's my job to do that. And maybe that's a piece of why acting is so great to me. I love watching people smile. I love making people proud. It's not even for me. It's not even the fact that like, oh, I'm doing these acting because it's a great thing for me. It's like, I want other people to see that I am a good person. That's why I'm so goofy. That's why I like to make people laugh, is like, I want people to remember me and I want people to stay with me. It's just the core fear that's embedded in that traumatic side of me.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from with that. And the number one thing is bringing up learned behaviors that are learned by what our parents teach us. It is an interesting thing because I'll go a little bit deep here, and then I'm just gonna turn it back over to you because we are reaching close to the hour mark.
Yeah.
But the thing is that most people don't know about me is that up until the age of like 16, I was torn between two households, and not like the traditional sense of being torn between two households where parents get a divorce. I was torn between two households from two sets of parents, where I have the people who are considered my biological family, and then the people who I consider my actual family. In terms of my biological family, were all like they were all born in like the 70s, but they were also very physically and mentally and emotionally abusive.
Mhm. Yep.
Whereas my true parents, they grew up in like the 40s and 50s, like the very definition of hold your stuff together so you can be better for everybody else around you. But they were also very nurturing and caring, and all of they brought all of the positive traits of growing up
Yeah.
in that era and none of the negative. Like for instance, it was, for any of you who don't know much about like the 40s, 50s and 60s, it was very acceptable to beat your kids when they were misbehaving.
Mhm.
My
Absolutely.
my parents never did that to me.
Yeah.
Like they were very stern, they were very upfront, and
Mhm.
for me, they're the reason why I am the person I am today and why I try to keep pushing myself better. But the fact of the matter is, um, I also picked up some of up until when I started to seriously look into therapy, I
Mhm.
did keep a lot of those really, really negative traits from my biological family, which is,
Mhm.
I mean, same thing as you, like when it comes to anxiety and attachment issues and all that.
Mhm.
I had those up until like 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it was like just being emotionally, like not thinking about things logically and letting your emotions
Yep.
literally run everything in your life.
Absolutely.
And here's one thing I want to point out when we're sort of talking about emotions and logic and everything. It's not, keeping in control of your emotions for the people around you is not like how the internet perceives it, or the
Right.
really negative spaces perceive it, where you've got to hold everything down and you've got to be a macho man,
Right, because that's dangerous. That's really dangerous.
but it's like having a balance of when you
Mhm.
know you need to be logical and think
Yep.
about things and
Right.
emotional
Somebody
is.
made it oh, sorry. Just really quick, like, somebody made an analogy that I really liked is, like, you know, somebody would be like, "Well, how would you like it if somebody was in war, going to war and they just break down, start crying, blah, blah, blah." And it's like, there are times and places for us to break down and cry and be stressed and sad or whatever. Of course, if I like, drop a piece of paper on the floor, is it socially acceptable for me to bawl my eyes out and, break down on the floor? No. You know, there are times and places, but we can't say that all crying or all, things like that is bad. And so, like you
Yeah.
said, yeah, finding that time and that place to say, like, this is an appropriate level of, like, my grandma just died. Like, I am sad. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna, or
Yeah.
I just had a partner leave me. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna, there's things.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about sort of pursuing the line of work that we are is that it does allow us sort of in our day-to-day life to think more logically about things, because
Yeah.
in terms of the way that I sort of look at it now is, obviously when I'm not doing this or making self tapes or auditioning or whatever, I work at Starbucks. And for any of
Hmm.
you who don't know, Starbucks is a very, very stressful place. And
Yep.
in terms of making your blood boil, if you're someone who works there, it can happen a lot. But the thing is, I always make sure that I schedule time to go to the gym after I'm done with Starbucks,
Yep.
because I'm
Yep.
so frustrated about how everything went during my shift that I just channel that frustration into exercise.
Yep.
Or, since we are building characters, making self tapes, and everything else,
Mhm.
if it's not like an extreme circumstance like a family member dying, or
Right.
like, let's say something super amazing happened where we can be super overjoyed about it, we can harness all of the what I'd like to say, right side of our brain sort of energy to be emotional and creative and all that,
Yeah,
and channel
absolutely.
that into the work. So in our
Yeah.
everyday life, we can just, if something comes up or an argument comes up, we don't need to get super emotional about it, and we can just logically think what to do,
Right.
because the best way to solve arguments, take a step back, take a deep breath,
Yeah.
and think about everything that's going on.
Right, like, I was taught, like, growing up, like, I was just so conditioned with my mom, like, I had stuff I wanted to say. And it was like, if I would get, yelled at, and then I would yell back and argue, and it was like, I just wanted to be heard, and so you yell, yell, yell. And there is that time, a place where I had to realize growing up as a teenager, like, sometimes the parent is not in a mental space to say like I can hear you, I can listen to you. And for you to step back and like take a breath and be like, I'm going to regulate my emotions and like say, you know, maybe this is a time to step back for me. And like you said, like finding a different outlet, you know, I wish that going to the gym was my like go-to stress reliever. I really wish. I'm like, please. But sometimes a lot of it is like, you know, writing a song or like playing the guitar or writing something, a journaling, playing video games, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
Like those things. And it's, of course, you shouldn't 100% like say like, oh, something negative, I'm feeling something negative, let me shut it off and instead do this.
No,
But like you
absolutely not.
said, channel it into that and like, I guess, recognize, hey, I am feeling this emotion, because that's what a lot of people do is like right when they feel that emotion, they're like, gotta get rid of it, gotta suppress that, gotta not show anybody. But like if it gets to the point, like if I'm sitting there and like I'm having a bad day and I watch a movie and some emotional scene comes on and I feel like crying, I'm gonna cry. I tell people all
Yeah.
the time, I'm like, I have no shame in the world. If you watch a sad movie with me, like I will cry. I get disgusting. It's like that's the person I am and I have no shame against it. And like so for me, like that's another channeling into media and movies and like finding, you know, things that you connect with to channel that emotion and be like, hey, I recognize I'm feeling this. Um, I am not maybe in the emotional state to address it right now. So let me regulate first. And now I'm in a conscious place to say, okay, I can you know, see and assess this emotion and work with it.
Yeah.
I
That
agree.
that's a beautiful, beautiful point. And I just wanna, before I turn this over to you for our last section here,
Yeah.
I just want to give a bit of a shout out to a book that I have recently picked up, uh, that I'm currently reading. And for those of you who don't know, I used to be a big reader in terms of like physical copies, but my life is so busy and I'm so like on the
Yeah.
go constantly. I listen to audiobooks, like audiobooks and podcasts
Mhm.
for the most part. And the one that I've been listening to right now is called The Body Keeps the Score. I'm not going to
Oh, my
try.
therapist mentioned that actually, now that you say it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try to pronounce the author's name because it's a little difficult. But the one thing I'm going to say that I'm sort of in the beginning, the first few chapters of it, but the one thing I have learned from this book is that trauma in any sense, it doesn't have to be something as big as like
Mhm.
sexual assault or
Yep.
somebody beating you or something. It can be just things that have affected you in a really negative way and have really morphed you into the person you are.
Trauma could be like your childhood blanket gets torn up. Of course, as
Yeah.
adults, we're like, "Oh, that's not a big deal. Let's get you a new one." As a child, that could mess you up for a
Yeah.
while. So yeah,
And
trauma can be very subjective.
what this book goes into is, and the author is somebody who has heavily, heavily worked in and studied psychology and
Mhm.
the human condition. And it's all about how trauma is not just something that you completely get rid of, because
Nope.
trauma at the end of the day is something that is a part of the very cells inside of your
Yep.
body. So if there's anybody out there who is interested, I will say that if you are going to pick it up, I do recommend that you read what the book is about first, because
Mhm.
it is a very heavy book. There
Mhm.
is a lot of triggering material inside of the book, especially since a good portion of it deals with people who are from the military and
Mhm.
who are dealing with that level of stress. So that right there is going to be my, I guess, my book recommendation of the episode
Yeah.
is talking about that. But like I said, I just started reading it and it has literally changed the way I look at a few things just in a few short chapters. But now that we're coming to the end of the episode, Scotty, I just want to turn it back
Yeah.
over to you to shout out anything or say
Yeah.
anything that you're sort of proud of or any last minute advice you want to give.
Yeah, I mean, definitely like since we start talking, you know, you brought up trauma and stuff. You know, it's very important to recognize like you said that it's not it's not an experience that you experience and it's like an episode of a TV show that you watch and then maybe like you remember for a few weeks and then it's gone. It's like there are pieces, especially for me personally, that there are, like you said, triggers and things that come up that you relive those traumas, you feel those, you experience those. And so I think it's important for people out there that think like, I'm overreacting or I'm, not sure if you had trauma in your childhood or in your, growing up, and there are constant reminders of that, I really do recommend, seeking out therapy, addressing those things because, it's gonna stick with you. It's just learning the tools and the ways to help make those better. I'm doing a lot of inner child work, so I highly recommend people out there research what inner child work is for those who've had childhood trauma. I'm going to school to do focusing more on childhood psychology and trauma. But yeah, that would be the advice I give. And if anybody is available Thursday through Sunday, consider seeing the Little Mermaid at Community Little Theater.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So, first of all, Scotty, I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Cody. I haven't seen you in
been
forever. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have been able to be on this and talk to you again.
Hey, look, I'm so happy to see you again. And
Yeah.
I'm overjoyed to see how things have been going for you.
I know. I see all your stuff that you're posting about. Like, I'm like, I'll see a short film that you're talking about, and then a few months later, I'll see another one. I'm like, wait, oh my gosh, he's a busy dude. This guy's busy. This guy's busy.
I mean, my natural state is I can't sit still.
Oh yeah.
But
I feel
that is how it be sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, once again, thank you so much for your time, Scotty.
No, thank you, Cody. I really appreciate you bringing me on to have an outlet to talk about this stuff.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Artists and Emotions podcast. I'm your host, Cody Alexander Curtis, and we hope that through this conversation, you've been able to take something that you can bring with you on your own mental health journey. But for now, my name is Cody Alexander Curtis. This is the Artists and Emotions podcast, and I'll see you all next time.